Conqueror. That name, it really echoes through history, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds powerful, almost mythical.
But the meaning. We actually don't know for sure what that title meant back then. It's kind of lost.
Which is fascinating in itself.
And his birth name, Temujin or Tatmokchen, that also shifts depending on who's writing about him.
You see it in Mongolian, Chinese, Persian, Arabic, even Syria.
Right. Chingiz, Zingiz.
And then in English, we get Genghis, Chinggis, Temujin.
It's like a linguistic map of his impact right from the names.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It hints at the huge cultural mix his empire would become, and also the challenge for us looking back. So many languages, so many viewpoints.
So who was this guy? Conqueror. Born, well, even that's debated, around 1155, maybe 1162. Some say 1167.
The dates are fuzzy. Died 1227, that's more certain.
But in that lifetime, he did something incredible. He united the Mongol tribes who were often fighting each other.
A monumental task in itself.
And then launched conquests that basically redrew the map of huge parts of China and Central Asia.
That initial unification was key, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Giving him the manpower, the unified purpose for everything that came later.
So in this deep dive, we want to get into his story. You're probably wondering, how did he rise so high? What were his methods? And what's his real legacy?
Now, we've got some interesting sources to work with.
Yeah, the main Mongolian ones, like The Secret History of the Mongols, the Mongol, and The Lost Altan Debtor, the Golden Book.
Then you have the Chinese records, translations, or interpretations, like the Goyen Su and the Tanvud and Chinlok.
Plus the Persian chronicles, especially Rashid al-Din's huge work, the Jamis al-Tawarikh.
Which immediately brings up the question.
Yeah.
How do we read these? The Mongolian sources might be, let's say, biased towards legitimizing the rulers.
Sure, and the Chinese sources often reflect the view from the conquered side.
And the Persian ones.
Yeah.
They range from sheer horror at the invasions initially to later attempts to kind of integrate the Mongols into Islamic history.
It's a complex web, different languages, sometimes contradictory stories, praise in one, condemnation in another.
Absolutely.
So our mission here is to sift through it all, pull out the key insights based on these sources, his rise, his methods, and that very complex legacy.
Sounds good. Where should we start? Early life.
Let's do it. Back to the beginning. His early life and those first steps towards power.
Okay. So the early years, like we said, a bit murky. His birth year is uncertain.
And even the birthplace. The secret history says Delyun Bulldog near the Anan River.
Right, but other places are suggested too. Dadal, maybe even parts of modern Russia.
But his family background is clearer.
Yes, fairly well established. His father was Yesugei, chief of the Borjigin clan. They claimed descent from the sort of mythical Bortachino.
And his mother, Holin, from the Ulkanet clan.
And her story is dramatic from the start.
Yeah.
Yesugei actually abducted her from her first fiancé, a merchant named Chiladu.
Wow. And that abduction had consequences later, right?
Big time. It fueled the conflict with the merchant tribe for years.
What about his name Temujin? Does that mean blacksmith?
That's one theory. It connects to the Mongolian word Timur, meaning iron.
Or was he named after someone his father captured?
Also possible. A Tatar chief named Temujin Yuji. Yesugei might have named his son after him to commemorate a victory. The sources mention both possibilities.
And the legends around his birth, like holding a blood clot.
Yeah, that's a classic steppe folklore motif. It's supposed to signify a future warrior, someone destined for greatness.
Sounds more like myth-making than history.
It probably is. There's also a story about his mother being impregnated by a divine light, linking him back to Alinkua, the Borjigin ancestor. These stories build up his destined status, you know.
He had brothers and sisters, too.
Yes, 3 full brothers, Khizar, Hachian, and Temuj, and a sister Timulin, plus 2 half-brothers, Bektar and Belgutai, from Yesugei's other wife.
Quite a family unit living along the Anan River.
But that family dynamic would get complicated later. A key event early on was his betrothal to Berte from the Conqueror tribe. He was only 8.
An important alliance.
Hugely important later. But tragedy struck soon after. On the way home from arranging the betrothal, Yesugei was poisoned.
By Tatars.
Yes, by Tatars. And that just changed everything for the family.
His father gone. What happened then? They were abandoned.
Pretty much. Their own Borjigin clan, especially the Taichud branch, refused to support them. Temujin was too young, Bektar only a bit older.
So Holin and the kids were left to fend for themselves.
Exactly. They became hunter-gatherers, faced real hardship. It must have been incredibly tough, probably forged a lot of his resilience, his drive.
And during this time, The incident with his half-brother, Bektir. Temujin killed him.
The secret history is the main source for this. It frames it as a dispute over resources, maybe over leadership within the now fatherless family.
This is a pretty harsh story.
It is. Holland was reportedly furious. Other official histories tend to skip over it. Interestingly, Bektir's full brother, Belgutai, stayed loyal to Temujin throughout his life.
So from this lowest point, how does he start building alliances? Jamuka and Togrul seem crucial.
Absolutely critical. He swore an Ada blood brotherhood with Jamuka when they were maybe around 11.
They were close then.
Very, according to the secret history. They camped together for over a year.
And Togrul, Khan of the Kharit.
Right. Temujin reached out to him, offering a valuable saber coat as a gift. Togrul had been Yesugai's ally, so he agreed to support the young Temujin, perhaps seeing an advantage for himself too.
But these alliances weren't always stable. Let's talk about Berta's capture.
Right, so Temujin marries Berta when he's about 15. But soon after, the Merkit raid their camp.
Revenge for Holland's abduction years earlier.
Seems likely. Temujin escapes, but Berta is captured.
So he turns to his allies.
Yes, he asks Togrul and Jamuka for help. They raise a large force, rescue Berta,
And soon after, she gives birth to Jochi.
whose paternity was, well, questioned given the circumstances. The secret history mentions it, but Rashid al-Din's account smooths that part over.
Understandable if you're writing an official history. But the bond with Jamuka, the Ikamida, that didn't last. Why did they split?
The secret history says it was about where to camp. Jamuka liked high ground. Temujin preferred being near water.
Seems minor.
It probably symbolized deeper issues, different leadership styles, maybe ambition. Initially, most of the elite actually followed Jamuka.
Really? Temujin was left with just a few followers.
Reportedly only 41 at first, though that included key figures like Subutai. Some historians even think Temujin might have served under Jamuka for a while, out of gratitude for the rescue.
And Temujin faced defeats early on, like against Jamuka himself.
Yes, the Battle of Dalong Baljut in 1187 was a loss for Temujin.
And there's that theory he spent time serving the Jin dynasty after that, like a whole decade.
It's an interesting possibility. The Mongol sources are quiet about those 10 years. There's a record by Zhao Hong that says Genghis Khan was once a Jin servant.
Why would he do that?
Well, historians like Rachnevsky and May suggest it wasn't uncommon for steppe leaders who lost power, or even disgraced Chinese officials, to seek temporary refuge or service elsewhere. He could have gained experience, maybe resources.
And maybe why it's not in the Mongol histories, because of the later war with the Jin.
Exactly. It wouldn't fit the narrative of his inevitable rise.
Okay, so he reappears around 1196 and gets involved in a Jin campaign against the Tatars.
Yes. And for his help, the Jin give Mujo a title, Chatkuri, something like Commander of 100.
So he's gaining some official recognition.
And crucially, around the same time, he helps Togrul secure leadership of the Kharit against rivals backed by the Naiman tribe. This really elevates Temujin's status. He's no longer just Togrul's junior partner.
But Jamuka, his actions after Dalong Baljot sound pretty brutal in some accounts, boiling enemies alive.
Some sources describe that, yes. And mistreating corpses. That kind of cruelty apparently pushed people away from him, including some former followers of Yesugai, who then joined Temujin.
So Jamuka's brutality kind of helped Temujin.
Inadvertently, perhaps. Temujin was also asserting his own authority, subjugating the Jurchen clan who'd slighted him, refusing to join a Tatar campaign. He was clearly building his own power base.
Things are heating up. We see alliances shifting, conflicts brewing. Then this anti-Temujin coalition forms around 1201, with Jamuka at its head.
Right. Various tribes unhappy with the growing power of Temujin and Togrul Conqueror, Taichu, Tatar. They proclaimed Jamuka their Gurkhan, Khan of tribes.
Their goal was to break the Temujin-Togrul alliance.
Exactly. They had some early success, but ultimately Temujin and Togrul defeated them at Yedikunan. Jamuka had to beg Togrul for mercy.
A big victory for Temujin, and he follows it up by crushing the Taichud and the Tatars.
Yes, after Yedikunan, he moved to consolidate control over eastern Mongolia, defeated the Taichud, then decisively beat the Tatars in 1202. Executed their leaders, but integrated their warriors.
And this is when key figures like Jebe join him.
That's right. Jebe famously shot Temujin's horse in battle. When captured, he confessed honestly. Temujin was impressed, took him into service. Sorkhan Shira, who'd helped Temujin years before, also joined up then.
So now you have the Naiman in the west, Temujin's Mongols in the east, Kharit in the middle, but the alliance with Togrul starts to break down.
Yes. His son, Sangam and Jamuka, plus others in the Karaite elite, became very wary of Temujin's rising power.
Why? Was it just ambition?
Partly. They also disliked Temujin, promoting commoners based on merit, disrupting the old tribal hierarchy. And they were suspicious of Jochi's parentage.
So they poisoned Tokrul against Temujin.
Pretty much. Temujin proposed a marriage alliance, his son Jochi marrying Togrul's daughter. Sangam and the others convinced Togrul to refuse and instead launch a surprise attack.
The ambush at the sands of Kalakolchid in 1203.
Exactly. Temujin was warned, but still outnumbered. He suffered a major defeat, had to retreat.
A serious setback. But this leads to the Beljuna Covenant, right? That oath of loyalty.
Yes. He retreated southeast to the Beljuna River. Its exact location is debated. His remaining followers regrouped there.
And swore an oath.
The Banshuni Oath. What's remarkable is the diversity of the group. 9 different tribes, different religions represented Christians, Muslims, Buddhists.
Wow.
They swore absolute loyalty to Temujin and each other. John Mann called them the proto-government of a proto-nation.
But the secret history doesn't mention it.
No. Possibly because many weren't from the Borjigin clan, and the author wanted to emphasize the Borjigin role in his rise.
Interesting. So, with this core group solidified, he turns the tables on the Karaite.
Yes, using a clever trick involving his brother Khazar, he defeated the Karaite at the Jejir Heights after 3 days of fighting.
What happened to Tokul?
He escaped the battle, but was killed by Naiman guards later while trying to flee. His son Sangam fled to Tibet.
And Temujin absorbed the Karaite forces.
Yes, incorporating their elite, further strengthening his own army. He also took one of Togrul's wives and arranged other strategic marriages for his family.
Okay, Karaite dealt with. Next target, the Naiman.
Right, they were now the main power in the west, joined by Jamuka and others. But Temujin got crucial intelligence from a Wangu chief, Alakwash, who had submitted to him.
So he was prepared.
Yes. He met the Naiman forces at Chakerma on the Altai Mountains in May 1204, a decisive victory for Temujin.
Naiman leader Tayang Khan killed.
Yes. His son Kuklug fled west again. Jamuka also deserted his own men during the battle.
Which brings us to the final steps in unifying the tribes, dealing with the Merkit and Jamuka.
The Merkit were defeated next, and Jamuka, his own followers betrayed him, handed him over to Temujin.
How did he die? The sources disagree.
They do. The secret history says Jamuka asked for an honorable death from his Andela, Temujin, and was granted it. Other sources suggest a much harsher execution, maybe dismemberment.
Either way, with Jamuka gone.
Temujin was the undisputed master of the Mongol steppe.
Which leads directly to the Great Kurultai of 1206 at the Onon River. This is where he becomes Genghis Khan Tankat Tuhan.
A massive turning point. He formally takes the title Genghis Khan.
What does Chinggis mean, exactly? Still debated.
Still debated. Some think it just meant rejecting Jamuka's title of Gurkhan. Others suggest meanings like strong, firm, resolute.
Or the oceanic theory.
Right, linking it to the Turkic word Tengiz, ocean. So Khan of the ocean, or metaphorically, ruler of the world. We don't know for sure.
But the title came with huge reforms. A social revolution, some call it. Breaking down the old tribal system.
Absolutely fundamental. The old kinship ties, the clan dominance, they were sources of constant division. Genghis Khan needed loyalty to the state, to him and his family.
The Altuniruk, the Golden family.
Or Chagan Yasun, Whitebone. They were supreme. The rest of the aristocracy, new and old, became the Kara Yasun, Blackbone, a complete shift in the social order.
And the decimal system organizing everyone into units of 10, 100, 1,000.
The Arban, Jokun, Minkan, yes. This was for military and civil administration. Each military Minkan had a household Minkan supporting it.
Like a military-industrial complex, you said.
Kind of, yeah. And crucially, these units deliberately mixed people from different tribes.
To break old loyalties and build new ones.
Exactly. Loyalty was now to the Minkan commander, and ultimately to the Khan and the great Mongol nation. Merit, not just birth, determined your place. It was incredibly effective.
He also rewarded his loyal followers, his new corps, with top positions.
Definitely. Bororchu and Mukwali became commanders of the main army wings. Others got command of the 95 Minkan.
And many came from humble backgrounds.
Yes, Dyalmi, Subutai sons of blacksmiths, shepherds. Even stable hands who warned him of Togrul's ambush got promoted. He valued loyalty and ability. although for some key allies, like Alaquash, he let them keep their kin together in their units.
What about the Kishig, the Imperial Guard? It became more than just bodyguards.
Much more. It expanded hugely after 1203, reaching 10,000 men by 1206 as a military academy, training future leaders. It was the central administration.
And its members had special privileges, sons of leaders serving as guarantees of loyalty.
Yes, effectively high-status hostages in some ways, but with direct access to the Khan, breeding fierce loyalty. Many top generals like Subutai and Jebi started in the Kisig.
Okay, so power consolidated, but then came internal challenges, like the shaman Kokochu, Teb Tengeri.
Right. Kokochu was the son of Munglig, who had married Holun after Yusuke's death. He'd actually been the one to bestow the title Genghis Khan.
So he had significant spiritual authority.
Huge authority. Proclaimed himself Teb Tengeri, entire heaven. But he started causing trouble, trying to undermine Genghis Khan's brothers, first Khazar.
He accused Khazar.
Yes, Khazar was publicly humiliated, nearly stripped of his position. Only Holun's intervention saved him. Then Kokochu targeted Temüga, the youngest brother.
So Berta advised Genghis Khan to deal with him.
She saw him as a threat to unity. Genghis Khan agreed, and Temüga was allowed to neutralize Kokochu. It firmly established the Khan's authority over spiritual power.
With internal threats managed, expansion begins again. North first.
Yes, Jochi went north in 1207, subdued the forest tribes, the Hoyan Urgan, secured fur trade routes, grain, gold mines.
And westward, against the leftover Naiman and Merkit.
They were decisively defeated along the Irtysh River around 1208. Kuflug fled again further west.
And the Uyghurs submitted voluntarily?
In 1211, yes. Under their leader, Barchuk. They broke away from the declining Western Liao, a big diplomatic win, the first settled society to join the empire willingly.
Then attention turned south to the western Shia, the Tangids. Raids started earlier, but a full invasion in 1209. Why?
Several reasons. Retaliation for sheltering Sangam, maybe? Need for resources, goods, livestock? Maybe a preemptive move to secure his southern flank before tackling the Jin?
Their main defenses were against the Song and Jin, right?
Yeah.
Leaving the north vulnerable.
Relatively undefended, yes. After an initial victory at Wuhai in 1207, the full invasion kicked off in 1209.
And they besieged the capital, Zongxing. Did they struggle with siege warfare then?
They did. After some initial success luring the Xia army out and defeating them, they couldn't breach the walls of Zongxing easily. They lacked heavy siege engines at this stage.
The western Shia asked the Jin for help.
Yes, but the Jin refused. Genghis Khan then tried diverting the Yellow River to flood the city.
Did that work?
Not really. The dam broke, apparently flooded the Mongol camp instead. Might have been sabotage.
So they negotiated.
Yes. The Xia emperor submitted, became a tributary, gave a princess in marriage, paid tribute. The Mongols withdrew in early 1210.
Okay, so western Shia is subdued for now. Then, just a year later, 1211, he goes after the Jin dynasty. A much bigger fish. Why?
Multiple reasons. Long-term revenge for past Jin actions, like killing his great-uncle Ambakai Khan. Obvious desire for Jin territory and wealth.
And the Jin emperor demanding submission.
Yes. Emperor Wanyan Yongji demanded it in 1210. Genghis Khan reportedly spat on the ground in response. That definitely didn't help relations.
The invasion in 1211, that three-pronged cavalry attack, sounds devastating.
It was very effective. They breached the outer defenses quickly, ironically helped by the Wangu Uyghurs guarding them, who were loyal to Genghis Khan.
Ah, so they just let them through.
Pretty much. The three Mongol columns then raided deep into Jin territory, gathering supplies, recruiting defectors, securing mountain passes. Mukwali won a major battle at Wannerzu, crippling the Jin-fueled army.
But they hit obstacles too. Genghis Khan wounded at Xijing.
Yes, in 1212, wounded by an arrow besieging Xijing, Datong, forced a temporary retreat. It really highlighted their need for better siege techniques.
So they developed a siege corps, using captured Jin engineers.
Exactly. Over the next couple of years, they built up that capability. Probably got about 500 Jin engineers involved.
And then they managed to take Zhuang Pass, opening the way to the capital, Zhongdu, Beijing.
Yes. Jeb led a force that infiltrated the heavily fortified pass in 1213, ambushed the defenders. That opened the North China Plain.
And the Jin were having internal problems too.
Big problems. Khitan rebellions, Emperor Yongji assassinated by one of his own generals, Emperor Xuanzong put on the throne. All this weakened their ability to resist.
The siege of Zhongdu itself sounds grim. Disease, famine for the Mongols too.
Very tough. Carpini's later story about cannibalism is probably an exaggeration, but conditions were clearly bad. Logistics were a nightmare.
So they made a peace treaty in 1214. Jin paid a huge tribute.
Yes. Horses, slaves, a princess, gold, silk. Genghis Khan accepted it and withdrew the main army. But the peace didn't last long
Why not?
because Empress Wanzong decided to move the Jin capital south to Kaifeng.
Genghis Khan saw that as a breach of the treaty, a sign of weakness.
Exactly. He thought they were moving south to regroup and fight again. So he broke the truce, sent the army back to besiege Zhongdu again.
And the city fell in 1215.
On May 31st, 1215, it was brutally sacked. Genghis Khan returned to Mongolia in 1216, leaving Mukwali to handle the ongoing war against the Jin remnants in the north.
So northern China largely secured, but his focus shifts west, suppressing that Siberian rebellion first.
Right. The Hoyin-Urgen rebelled. Jochi went back up there and put it down quickly, reasserted control over those trade routes.
And then dealing with Kukhlug in the western Liao.
Yes. Kuslug, the Naiman prince who'd fled west, had seized control of the Western Liao or Karakitai Empire in Central Asia.
And he was persecuting Muslims.
Yes, forcing conversions to Buddhism, making himself very unpopular. Genghis Khan saw him as a threat, sent Jebi after him in 1218 with about 20,000 cavalry.
Just 20,000.
A relatively small force, but highly mobile. Jebi played it as smart, promised religious freedom, which won him local support.
And Kukhlug.
He fled into the Pamir Mountains, was eventually caught and executed. End of the Western Liao, and end of the religious oppression there.
Which brings the Mongol Empire right up against the Khwarezmian Empire.
A huge, wealthy empire controlling Persia and Central Asia.
And the trigger for war was the Otrar incident.
The infamous Otrar massacre, yes.
Yeah.
A large Mongol trade caravan, maybe 450 merchants, arrived in the Khwarezmian border city of Otrar in 1218,
And the governor.
in Elchik. He accused them of spying, seized their goods, and had them all killed.
Did the Sultan Muhammad II know?
He seems to have either proved or just let it happen. He was suspicious of the Mongols anyway.
So Genghis Khan sent diplomats.
Yes, demanding justice. But Muhammad II had one of the envoys killed, insulted the others, a massive diplomatic insult.
That was it. War.
That was the breaking point.
Yeah.
Genghis Khan was enraged. He left Mukwali in China and prepared for a full-scale invasion of Khwarezm.
But the Khwarezmian Empire, despite its size, was divided internally.
Yes, big time. Rivalry between Sultan Muhammad and his powerful mother, Turk and Khatun. Lots of instability.
And Muhammad's strategy, defending cities instead of fighting in the open.
A fatal mistake. He garrisoned cities with often unreliable troops rather than concentrating his forces. It played right into the Mongols' hands. They excelled in open-field maneuver warfare.
So they just picked off the cities one by one. Otrar, Bukhara, Samarkand.
Pretty much. Otrar besieged first, fell in early 1220 after months. Inalchuk executed.
Oh.
Reportedly by having molten silver poured into his eyes and ears. A message, perhaps?
Brutal. And Bukhara and Samarkand.
While Otrar was besieged, Genghis Khan took the main army on a daring march across the Kizilkum Desert, surprising Bukhara, which fell quickly in Feb 1220. Samarkand, the capital, fell the next month.
And Sultan Muhammad.
He fled west, terrified. Jebi and Subutai were sent in relentless pursuit.
They chased him all the way to the Caspian Sea.
Yes. He ended up dying of illness on a small island there in the winter of 1220-21. His son, Jalal ad-Din, took over the resistance.
And while this is happening, Jebi and Subutai go on their great raid around the Caspian.
An incredible campaign. 4 years, thousands of kilometers, pushing into Georgia, Russia. Territories unknown to the Mongols before. A reconnaissance in force, really.
Meanwhile, other Mongol forces are busy, sieging Gurganj.
Yes. Genghis Khan's older sons, Ogadai and Chagatai, led the siege of Gurganj, the old Khwarezmian capital. It was a long, bitter siege, finally fell in spring 1221.
And Jalal ad-Din, he fought back in Afghanistan.
He did. Managed to rally forces, even won a battle against the Mongol detachment at Parwan, a rare Mongol defeat.
But it didn't last.
No. Internal divisions weakened him. Genghis Khan sent a larger force, defeated Jalal ad-Din decisively at the Indus River in late 1221. Jalal ad-Din escaped across the river into India.
And Tului's campaign in Khorasan, notoriously destructive.
Extremely. Tului, Genghis Khan's youngest son, was tasked with pacifying Khorasan. Cities that resisted Nishapur, Merv, Herat were systematically destroyed, their populations massacred.
The casualty figures from Persian sources are immense, millions.
Likely exaggerated, yes. Some historians put the total campaign deaths around 1.25 million, which is still staggering. But those Persian accounts of 5.7 million, while maybe inflated, show the sheer terror the campaign inspired. It cemented the Mongol reputation for ruthlessness.
Then, in 1221, Genghis Khan stops the main campaign, heads back east.
Somewhat unexpectedly, yes. He decided not to push further west or south into India, probably worried about the climate and overstretching his forces.
So he consolidates control, sets up administration.
Spends 1222 consolidating Khorasan, then begins the long withdrawal. He appointed governors Daragachi and Busquak to oversee the conquered lands and collect tribute, a basic administrative structure.
And this is when he meets the Taoist sage Changchen.
Yes, Chuji met him in the Hindu Kush region on the return journey. Genghis Khan was apparently seeking wisdom, maybe the secret to immortality.
Did he get it?
Changchen basically told him moderation and tranquility were key. Genghis Khan was impressed enough to grant Taoists significant privileges, like tax exemption, a major boost for Taoism in the empire.
So why head back east? Was it the Western Shia acting up again?
That seems to be the main reason. They hadn't sent troops for the Khwarazm campaign as ordered back in 1219, and they'd been defying Mukwali's authority while Genghis Khan was away.
Although some historians think they stayed loyal until Mukwali died in 1223.
Right, Timothy May suggests that. Either way, by the time Genghis Khan returned, they were seen as insubordinate. He tried diplomacy first, but they stalled. Patience ran out.
Leading to the final campaign against them in 1226-27.
Meticulously planned. Started early 1226, captured Karakoto, moved swiftly through the Hexi corridor.
Took Lingwu, near the capital, defeated a relief army.
Yes, Lingwu fell in November. Decisive victory against a relief force in December, led by Genghis Khan himself. He then delegated the final siege of the capital, Yinchuan Zongxing, and went south with Subutai to campaign against the Jin.
But he didn't live to see the end of the siege.
No. He fell ill during that final campaign, maybe after a fall from his horse in the winter. He died in August 1227.
And they kept his death secret until the capital surrendered.
Yes. Only then was it announced.
And the consequences for Western Shia were final.
Utterly devastating.
Yeah.
After Zongxing surrendered, the population was massacred. Their entire civilization effectively wiped out. Possibly as revenge, maybe to fulfill Genghis Khan's final orders. Some call it genocide.
And the cause of his death, still debated, illness, arrow wound, lightning.
All proposed. Rashid al-Din and the Yuan Shi say illness, typhus, malaria, plague. Marco Polo said an arrow wound. Carpini said lightning.
And the story about the Tangut princess.
Gerbelchin, supposedly castrating him on their wedding night. Almost certainly a legend, but it shows the kind of stories that grew up around him.
His burial wishes were specific. Secret burial near Burkhan Khaldun.
Yes, in the Khenti Mountains. The funeral was secret, the location guarded, creating the Ik Korig, the forbidden zone. Adds to the mystique.
So he's gone, now succession, no clear system.
Not really codified for the Gegan title. Tradition often favored the youngest son for family property, but not necessarily the empire.
Who are the candidates? Jochi, Chagatai, Ogadai, Tului.
His four main sons, yes. And his youngest brother, Timuj, might have been considered too.
But Jochi was out because of the paternity question.
That and apparently a strained relationship with his father. Chagatai strongly objected to Jochi.
And Chagatai himself.
Seen as perhaps too harsh, too rigid.
Tului was popular, a good general.
Very much so. But Ogadai, he seems to have been Genghis Khan's preferred choice before his death.
Why Ogadai?
Seen as more diplomatic, maybe more traditional, generous. Tului served as regent for 2 years, as tradition dictated stopping campaigns, convening a Kurultai.
And the Kurultai in 1229 formally elected Ogadai.
Yes, with support from key figures like Yilu Chukai. Ogadai became the second great Khan.
Which brings us to his legacy. It's incredibly contradictory, isn't it?
Absolutely. Unifier of the Mongols, creator of the largest land empire ever, facilitator of trade and exchange, the Pax Mongolica, established law, administration.
Even if the details of the Yasa law code are debated.
Right. But on the other side, the sheer scale of death and destruction, annihilation of cities, cultures.
And the succession issue, while resolved initially with Ogadai, eventually led to the empire breaking up.
The division into appanages for his sons, while meant to provide for them, sowed the seeds for fragmentation. By the late 13th century, you have independent Khanates, Golden Horde, Chagatai, Ilkhanate, Yuan dynasty.
And how he's viewed varies so much depending on where and when you look.
Hugely. Revered founder in Mongolia, apocalyptic figure, then instrument of God in parts of the Islamic world, symbol of legitimacy for later rulers, reviled destroyer in the Arab world, negative figure in Russia.
Complex in China, now mostly positive.
Shifting views, yeah. From foreign invader to symbol of national strength. And in the West, from noble savage to barbaric tyrant, and now maybe a more nuanced view is emerging.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've seen his journey from outcast kid to empire builder. His reforms were incredibly effective.
Undeniably a strategic and organizational genius.
But the human cost, staggering. You can't ignore the brutality alongside the achievements. He's a figure who forces you to confront the complexities of history.
A truly complex legacy. His impact is still felt, still debated around the world.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. When you look at the scale of what he built and the methods he used, what does his story tell us about power, about leadership, about how empires rise and fall?
It's a question worth pondering. And maybe it encourages looking deeper into those varied sources we talked about to see the different facets of this incredibly consequential figure.